Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the next session of our RAG Deep Dive series, RAGChat, Customizing Our RAG Solution. My name's Anna. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for Pamela to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It'll be available to view on demand within 24 to 48 hours right here on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. With that, I'll turn it over to Pamela. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. I am super excited to be talking today on this topic. I am Pamela Fox. I'm a cloud advocate on the Python advocacy team at Microsoft, which means I help developers use Python with Azure. And of course, in the last few years, it's been all about AI and especially RAG, which is one of my favorite topics. So in this series, we are diving deep into our most popular RAG solution, which is very fully featured. And we're really going into all the different features and trying to explain everything and answer all the questions and really share all the knowledge. So this is our second session in the series. If you missed it, a couple days ago, we introduced the solution and went through how it works, the Azure architecture, how to deploy it. You can go back and watch that recording if you missed it, and you can go back and watch all of these once they happen because we will have recordings for all of them. So today we're going to be talking about how to customize that RAG solution. And as you can see, we have a bunch of topics coming up as well. So definitely do register for the whole series if you haven't yet. We even added a topic based off a comment last time. So, this series could just keep growing as people suggest more comments. So we have even a new topic here, extending RAG with function calling. So yeah, definitely sign up if you haven't yet. So today we're going to look at the RAG solution and how we can add our own data to it, how we can do local development, how we can customize the prompts, how we can customize the UI, and how we might add whole new features to it. So first, let's talk about our RAG solution, especially for those of you who are new to the series. So as you can see, we have this RAGChat application. We have all the code fully available in the repo at aka.ms/RAGChat. That's where you'll find the GitHub repo with all the code. And you can even try the working demo at aka.ms/RAGChat/demo. So I'll go to it here so you can see. All right, so here's the application, and this is with some sample data. So we can go ahead and ask a question, and we can see the responses come streaming in, and that response has citations, and that citation is a PDF, and we can click on that PDF and it goes straight to the page. So that's, that is our RAG solution. This is the most basic way of using it. It does have lots of optional features that we'll be getting into this series here. So that's how it looks like when you first deploy it, right? And so the first step usually is deploying it, making sure that you can get it working and looking like this and with our sample data. But then once it's deployed, well, then you're going to want to start customizing it, right? Like you want it to be about your own data. You don't care about our sample data, right? You want it to look like it's your company's app. You want it, just to be fully customized for your domain, for your company, your organization. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Is like, how can we take this and make it customized for our scenario? And welcome, everyone. I see people coming from all over. So that's really exciting. So we've got Seattle, Virginia, Oklahoma, Peru. That's awesome. All right. So first, let's talk about adding your own data, because that's really exciting to start getting to ask questions about your own data and seeing what kind of responses you get back. And that's when people start getting excited about the power of RAG. So for the repo, there are two different data ingestion options. The default is a manual ingestion process, which is just a script that runs on your local machine. And it supports quite a few file formats. So we can do PDF files, we can ingest HTML, we can ingest Office files, we can ingest images, we can ingest JSON, we can ingest CSV. So sometimes it's using document intelligence for that, and sometimes it's just using some Python package. And it'll like store page numbers, and it's got lots of optional features too. And if you ever need to change it, you can customize it by changing the script. There is also another option for how to ingest data, which is called integrated vectorization, which will run in the cloud. So it'll actually run on an Azure server. And so some people opt to go for that as well. If you are interested in integrated vectorization, we're not going to talk about it today. We are going to talk about it more in the AI search session, which will be next Tuesday. So come to that session to talk a bit more about integrated vectorization. So today we're going to be using the manual indexing in order to add new data. So the way that we trigger the manual ingestion is by running this prep doc script here, right? So there's either a shell script or a PS1 script, depending on whether you're Linux, Mac, or Windows, right? But they'll both end up calling the same code. And what that script does is that, it first uses document intelligence to extract data from your documents, whether it's PDFs or other ones, right? So actually, let me go ahead and live do this. So extract data from your docs and uploads documents. All right, because when we first came up with this repo, we only supported PDFs, but since then we've added support for all these other formats, right? So first, it's going to take a document and send it to Azure Document Intelligence. Say, hey, here's my document. Please extract the text out of it, right? So Document Intelligence does an amazing job extracting text out of so many different document formats. And so then we'll get the text out of there. And then we'll take that text and we'll split the text into chunks. And, those chunks are about 500 tokens long. And that's an optimal chunk size for a RAG application. So it's that way we're not storing the entire document's text in a single chunk. We're chunking it up into good sizes. So we split it into chunks. We upload those documents to Azure Blob Storage. We compute the embeddings for the chunks, and then we store both the chunk text and the embeddings in the index. So how do we actually change the data? The first step is that we want to clear out the existing index. And, this step is maybe a little scary to do because we're going to clear out a bunch of data. But basically, you're just going to remove all, right? So I'm actually not going to do that one just because I don't have to. So I'm only going to add data today. You would want to remove all the data first because you really don't need the sample data. I'm just going to add data. So for your scenario, you're going to first call this remove all, and that's going to completely clear out the index. So there's going to be nothing left in your Azure AI search index once you removed it all. And then once you've removed it, then you're going to add new documents. So how do we do that? So let me go ahead and open up my VS Code. All right. And you can see here the data folder. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Okay. All right. So you see this data folder, and it has a bunch of documents in it. And for each document, there's also an MD5 file, which is a hash, which keeps track of whether it's been indexed already. And okay, so you can see what has already been ingested. So I'm going to go ahead and open a local folder, which has a bunch of documents in it. So I am going to move those into the folder. So I'll just go ahead and delete all these stuff. Now, remember, deleting it from the data folder hasn't actually deleted it from the index. You'd also need to remove it from the index with that command I gave. All right, now I'm going to move in some new documents. So these are the ones I wanted to add. And then I'm going to run scripts prepdocs.show. Okay, and so this we can watch as it goes through the process, right? So It's creating a Python virtual environment because it's going to be using Python to go through this process, installing the documents in there, installing all the dependencies in there. And then it's running this script prepdocs.py. And that's what manages all this stuff. All right, so if we look at what it's actually doing, let me now make it a little smaller. All right. So it's really actively going, but let me start from one. Okay, so it says it's ingesting this Hummingbird Sage. Okay, so it's ingesting this PDF here. First, it's extracting the text using Azure Document Intelligence. Then it is splitting up that text. Then it's uploading the blob. Then it's computing the embeddings. And then it puts it in the index, right? So it does this for each of the new documents that it finds. And you can get a feel for, the speed at which it does this, right? So this one's pretty fast because these are really small PDFs. You can ingest much larger PDFs. You can ingest things that aren't PDFs, as well. And, the time is really dependent on how large of the file is, like how much does document intelligence have to process. And then also how many embeddings, right? Because a larger file is going to mean a lot more embeddings that have to be computed. So that part could take more time too. But this gives you a feel for, roughly how long it takes to ingest stuff into your index. And you can see as it goes along that it adds the hash files to indicate what's been processed. So I think it's basically done now. Yeah. So there we go. So now everything is ingested into the index. So now if I go back to here, now I should be able to ask questions about that data that just got uploaded. And I should be able to do it basically instantly, right? Once it's in the index, I should be able to use it. So let's say what butterflies are on California buckwheats. Let's see if we can get an answer here. Okay. All right. So yeah, so we got an answer. It came from, it pulled from two different documents because there were two different documents about buckwheats uploaded here. And we can, see when we open it that it talks about that butterfly, has a picture. And then, and then this one has another one on it, right? So we can look at each of them and see the other butterfly here. Beautiful. And there we go. So that's how quickly you can add new data and start checking to see, like, how good are the answers that I get from this application. I see a question from Paulo. Is this the same process that the chat flow template in prompt flow uses? So the manual ingestion process is unique. At least our particular scripts are unique to this repo. And so you can see, like, they're all under everything that has to do with ingestion is under app backend prep docs lib. So you can see here, we've got like specialized parsers here for CSV and JSON because we do those. We parse those locally without document intelligence. We've got PDF parser, which is actually the document intelligence parser. So this is all code that's inside this repo. We've got our own splitter here. And you can see it does splits on sentence word breaks and Chinese, Japanese, Korean word breaks, right? So this code is all specific to this repo. For other RAG repos, they may be using their own manual indexing code. They may be using a library like LangChain or Llama Index, which, LangChain has a great splitter called the recursive character text splitter, right? So they might be using, ingesters and splitters from packages, like LangChain and Llama Index. Those are the most popular ones for Python. And then other RAG repos might be using integrated vectorization, right? So, as I was saying, another option is integrated vectorization, and we can use that with this repo as well as an optional feature. And that is one that you probably would see other repos using as well. It's also if you just go into the portal. So if we go into the portal and we go and open an AI search index, let's go here. And we open up, let's see, search service. and we do this import and vectorized data, that is the same as doing setting up integrated vectorization. So we have code that sets that up in here for people who want it. It'll set up this process, but there's also this UI for doing it too. So yeah, data ingestion is actually it's a pretty hard problem. So figuring out like doing good data ingestion is hard because you want to be able to ingest lots of different types of documents. You want to be able to do it reliably, and when they change, you want to have really good splitting. You want to have embeddings computed, right? So you will see different different repos, different solutions have different approaches for ingestion. So we have these two approaches of the all this Python code here, or of doing the integrated vectorization. Yeah, and then Prabha is asking, is there a file upload functionality in the front end? Yeah, so let me open up my other deployed demo that has that feature enabled so I can demonstrate it. Let's see. Okay, I got it. So you can only use this feature if you have the user login enabled, right? So I'm opening up the one that has user login and doing my face. There's my face. Okay. All right. And so then you can see this manage file uploads. And so if I upload here, like, let me actually try it right now. Live demos, yay, should work. We did it during the other one. So let me look and get a similar one to what we were just uploading. Plants, here we go. Okay, so when I upload the file, that is doing the same manual ingestion process that we just did locally, right? So you can imagine, and we saw how fast it was, right? So when I uploaded that file, it uploaded it to an Azure Blob Storage, well, actually an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 container specific for me, for my user ID. It uploaded it to that blob storage or data lake storage container. And then it did this whole process of, extraction, uploading, splitting, indexing, etc. And so then I can ask questions like, what butterflies are on Huckleberry? So you can see I only care about butterflies. Oh, I guess there was nothing about huckleberries in there. It did find, and it's saying like whenever we're debugging, always look at the thought process, right? So it did actually find the results about huckleberry, and interesting in this case, it actually found a good result here, the elfin butterfly, but for some reason it didn't feel like it could answer the question, right? So in this case, it didn't feel like it knew what the answer was, even though it did find the results. So we could dig more into the data ingestion and chunking and all that. Okay, tell me about California huckleberry. I'm always going to type it wrong here. Let's see. There we go. So that's pulling from that document that I just uploaded. Yeah, generally, so I think what the issue is that in the chunks, so it's really interesting when you see it not work well. It's actually very interesting to debug it. So let's take a look, right? So let's say you see that it's not working well. What do you do then? So I do have a whole doc about this as well. I'll post that in the chat. So improving answer quality, right? So when you get a poor quality answer, you want to know like what went wrong, right? So we want to look at the steps. We see like, okay, it did find the results, right? It said like, okay, huckleberry, Bacanema, danana, okay. And it said featured butterfly. And it actually had it had a lot of good information there. And, in this case, I actually don't really know why it didn't. We could even specifically ask like, let's try that. Somebody suggested singular. What butterfly? With an LLM, so there's the thing, when an LLM is not sure, it sometimes won't answer, right? Which is good. We don't want it to answer if it doesn't think it knows, right? That we'd rather see I don't know than to see overconfidence, Okay, so here this time we did get a good response. So it might be that, it didn't feel like it specifically answered about what butterflies, like multiple butterflies, but it felt confident enough to say like, well, there's at least one butterfly. So that was a great suggestion from Sadiq. Okay, I see question. So I see there's a question about an error that you're getting. I'll have Discord office hours tomorrow, so that's a good time to come with any deployment errors. But generally, you do need to have a subscription when you're deploying it. So that's probably your issue. And then for Ahmed had a question, could we automate this manual process using container apps jobs to read? Yeah, and we even have a branch that does that actually. I can dig up the branch for you if you maybe ask on LinkedIn, because we demonstrated that just for a talk about container app jobs. So there's definitely people who will put this inside a container app job. There's people who will put this behind an Azure function. I think we are hoping to put it behind an Azure function to make it easier to use. So there's definitely ways that you can use all this code and be able to run it in the cloud if you want to do that instead of using integrated vectorization, which is another way of running in the cloud. And okay, there's a question, is the AI search indexing triggered every time a file is uploaded, or is it pulled at regular intervals? So for the file upload feature, we do the indexing immediately when we upload it. For the data ingestion that I just showed, we're only indexing when we run the script. If you use integrated vectorization, you can set up your indexer to work on a schedule, because there you'd be using what's called an indexer from AI search. And there you can set that up to work on a schedule or to work on triggers. So you have options when you're using an AI search indexer. So the answer is it depends. We are going to talk more about that in the AI search session too. Cool. All right. So let's keep going, because we've got a lot more stuff to customize. But as you can see, this is the general approach to how you're going to bring in your own data. All right. So now let's talk about local development. And this is the application architecture, right? So it helps to understand the architecture when you're going to start developing it locally, so you can see the different components that we're actually working with. So there's a TypeScript front end, and all the code for that is in app/front end. And that is built with React components and Fluent UI as kind of our UI framework library. And, it's got a bunch of TypeScript files, CSS files, etc. Then we've got that sends API requests to a Python backend. And all of that code is in /app/backend. And that uses a Python framework called Quart, which is an asynchronous framework, very similar to Flask. So if you know Flask, Quart's going to look like pretty much the same. And then we use Unicorn to actually run the Quart application and handle all the requests. And generally, the entry point is app.py for the backend. So when you're getting started, you just start with app.py, and that's going to lead to all the other places. So how do we start that local server? So there's actually a couple different ways. So let me go here. So one way is to cd into the app folder and then run start.sh or start.ps1 if you're on a Windows machine. So that's similarly going to make a Python virtual environment and make sure it's got all the packages that it needs, which is quite a lot of packages now. And then it's also going to make sure it's got all the NPM packages that it needs. So you can see here, like our front end folder has a node modules inside of it. So that's where it's installing all the node modules. And then our virtual env here has all the Python packages. So start.sh is doing all of that, right? Making sure we've got NPM set up, we've got Python set up. Then it's going to turn all the TypeScript into, into files that like just single files or a couple files that it can then move into the backend folder. So what we do is we compile the TypeScript, turn it into just, .js files, and then we move it into this backend folder which has static inside of it. And so they're all those static files get copied here. So that way, the only thing that actually gets deployed in the end is the app backend folder. We actually don't deploy the front end folder. So because we've already copied everything in there that it needs. And then finally, so once we have everything ready, then we start the Python server. And oh, address already in use. I'm already running it with a different process. Okay. I'll restart that there. And see, it's gonna do all this again. So I actually do not use this I don't use this way of running the local server myself because it is really slow, because every single time we run it, it's, resetting up that Python environment, recompiling the TypeScript. Like, it's just going through a lot of work, right? So this is how a lot of people will get started, just to, make sure it's working. And then we can open it up at 50505 and we're like, okay, great, it's working. It's using the compiled JavaScript and it's working. But the issues with running this start script is that, it takes a lot of time to run this script. And we don't have like hot reloading of our JavaScript. So if we were like changing our JavaScript at the same time, like we wouldn't see any of the changes. So it's not the best approach. The next thing you might try is running the front end separately so that you can get hot reloading for the front end. So here what you can do is, I've got this running. It's running on 50505. Okay, great. Then I start up another terminal and I CD into my front end and say, okay, in my front end, I want to npm run dev. And so now I've got the front end server running at 5173. Let me open that up over here. Okay, so now this has hot reloaded files. So if I change anything, I can instantly see it in the front end. So if I'm developing the front end, I definitely want to be developing it in a way where I can get hot reloading and not having to wait for it to get compiled, right? So that's one approach of what you can do. Now I'll show you what I normally do, because I'm normally in VS Code. And so what I do is that I go to the run and debug over here, and I select front end and back end, and then I press run. And what that does, it starts up two processes. It starts up the front end in hot reloading mode, and the front end was too fast. So sometimes the front end starts up before the back end and you'll see a little error. And then it starts up the back end in debugging mode so that I can actually use the Python debugger. And now they're both running on their server. So I'll go ahead and open up the front end again. And here it's great. And it's proxying to that, the back end that's being run at the other port. And so I'm able to, to use it that way. So that's what I normally do, because that way I get the hot reloading for the front end, which I want. So let me just like demonstrate a hot reload in the front end. Let's see. Let me change something real quick. I'll just add exclamation points. Okay. So as you can see, it saw there was a reload. If I go back here in the title up there, you can see a bunch of exclamation marks, right? So I get that hot reloading that I want, which is great. And then I also can use the Python debugger, which is also really, really good, right? Being able to use a debugger. So then, like, let's say I want to like debug something about the RAG flow. I can set a breakpoint. And then when, when it's actually running the code, you can see it immediately broke at that breakpoint. And so now I can like dig in and say, okay, I want to see, what this code is actually doing. Okay, it's getting that. I can look at my local variables, see what's happening, dig in, right? So this is really nice, right? I get my hot reloading, I get my debugging. It's a nice development experience. So this is what I would recommend if you're doing local development. I think the best is using the VS Code run and debug, so you get the best of both worlds. Okay, so that's what I'll be using for my development today, and I'll just leave that running there. All right, so we saw debugging. And this is a general backend code layout just to show you, we've got an app.py, which is the entry point for everything. It defines all the routes and it has the configuration of the app. Then we've got files for each of the tabs and flows. So there's, the chat tab and the ask tab have their own file. And we also have a folder for all of the prompts. That's a general layout. There's some other files that handle other stuff as well. And then for the front end, this is the general layout of the front end. It's all in app/front end. There's the index.html that pulls in all the JavaScript and has, all the HTML metadata and all that. There's a main layout.tsx that lays out the whole page. And then there's chat.tsx and ask.tsx that are specific to the tabs. Okay, so that was local development. I do see there's a question about from Kwong. It says Microsoft is rolling out co-pilots for almost every SaaS product they have, like Teams, Office, etc. Will there be a path to enhance on building that using the own RAG approach? Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually haven't worked a ton with our custom co-pilots yet, and that's something I need to do more of. I think what you would end up doing is building agents for those co-pilots, and that I know there is a path to building agents for co-pilots. I haven't tried it out myself. You can also build bots for Teams. So my colleague Gary Trinder, he's got some repos that create RAG for Teams bots, and one of them was specifically based off of this repo. So I think there's multiple approaches to like integration with Teams. So with Teams, you could write your own like bot from scratch or write an agent for Teams Copilot. And then just generally for any Copilot, the approach would be writing an agent for that Copilot that's using, their way of writing an agent, and that brings in your own data. It's not something I've done personally, but there definitely are repos that show how to do that, and hopefully Reactor streams in the future that talk about that from my colleagues. And can I share the Teams bot that is based off this repo? The best thing to do actually is to search for, I'll show you how I would find it because I don't have it like handy, but I'm going to search for Teams bot, and I think it's here. Okay. And nope. All right. Let's see. Publish app. Oh, there we go. Publish app to Teams. Okay. And PR. All right. So here we go. Okay. So this is what he wrote originally. And then he says there's another one that is in the gallery. Here we go. Okay. So it looks like this is the most recent one. I was saying this is my colleague, Gary Trinder. So he's the one to reach out to with Teams questions. And I'll also chat with him to see what the latest is. But it looks like this is the latest sample. So I would definitely check this one out and reach out to Gary with more questions. Great questions. Okay. Cool. All right. So now let's talk about customizing the prompts, because that is something that you'll definitely want to do when you're customizing this solution. So just to remind you, how our RAG flows work, we're going to start with just customizing the prompts for the Ask tab. So the Ask tab is our single turn RAG, which is our simplest RAG flow. So here we can say like, does buckwheat like full sun? Let's see. Thinking really hard. Okay. Yes, buckwheat likes full sun. Thank you. So there we go. So we asked a question, we got an answer. So we're going to start with just customizing the prompt here because it's our simplest RAG. So we'll start simple, right? So we asked the question, we use that question to search AI search. We got back results, sent that to the LLM, and asked the LLM to answer the question. So for this flow, we have one prompt involved, and that's our question answering prompt. And you can even see this used in the thought process here. If you click on the light bulb, We can see at the end, here's the prompt to generate the answer. So this is what was actually sent to the LLM in order to generate the answer. Now, for how we write our prompts, we're using this file format called prompty. And this is a change I actually made just yesterday. So if you got the repo before yesterday, you're going to want to pull in the latest changes to see this. So let me go ahead and open up the prompty file. Okay. So prompty is a file format that aims to be like a standard way of representing prompts that you can send to LLMs. And a prompty is a combination of YAML at the top, and the YAML is the metadata about the prompt, and then Jinja 2 at the bottom. And the Jinja 2 is what constructs the sequence of messages that get sent to the LLM. And it uses the Jinja 2 templating language. So you can see, if you know Jinja 2, you can see that, we're using these templating syntax like if and else and for in order to take what's passed into the template and render it. So I'm pretty excited about prompty because it's a nice way of representing our prompts and be able to see in one place, like, okay, this is what our prompt is, and also this is how we can customize it. And yeah, it's a lot nicer than how we were managing prompts before. Before, our prompts were, they were kind of all over the place. They were mostly inside like Python multi-line strings, and they were honestly pretty gnarly to manage. So now we've got all our prompts in prompty files in this one folder, and you can look and see everything that's part of a particular LLM call just in this one prompty file. All right, so here's the prompt. And so you can see, the system message, that's the main thing we want to modify. It says, you're an intelligent assistant helping Contoso Inc. employees with their healthcare plan questions and employee handbook questions. Okay, so already I want to change that, right? Because I'm making an application about native plants, right? So, there's a few ways we can change it. So one thing is that we could go ahead in here and change the code, right? So we can say like, okay, you are a assistant asking questions from, gardeners about California native plants. Okay. So now I've customized that to my domain. And now to test this out, I'm going to restart the server. So when I am doing, the one thing about this debugger is that if I'm in debugger mode, it's not hot reloading my Python files. So that's the drawback of this one. I could enable hot reloading maybe, but I'll just go ahead and restart the server. It's pretty fast anyway. So I don't mind so much. All right, so now I've restarted the server. And so I'm going to go ahead and just send this again. Oh, and wait, I should use, this is the deployed server. So let me go ahead to our local one. Okay, all right. And we'll just go to the Ask tab and say, does buckwheat like full sun? Okay. All right. And then you can actually, okay, so we got the answer, and let's look at the thought process. And now you can see in the thought process, it says that what got sent to the LM is you are an assistant answering questions from gardeners about California native plants. So we successfully modified the prompt. So that's one way that you can modify a prompt. Another way is that we have this developer settings, and you can just override prompts here. And so sometimes people like to use it, or maybe you have prompt engineers to use this, right? So you could go ahead and like take the current one and then, just paste it in there and then like change stuff. And I could be like, only answer with one sentence answers. Yeah, I'll just be belligerent about it. Do not ever give more than one sentence. Also use emojis liberally, especially of flowers. Okay. Let's try this one. And I will go ahead and send my question. Okay, I got the same response. Did it work? Yeah, Yeah. So the interesting thing is, like, you can try to do prompt engineering and sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. And part of the reason that it's not as effective, my prompt is not as effective, is because we do have few shot examples. And those few shot examples are kind of like working against my prompt, because this few shot example doesn't have emojis, and so it doesn't, it's not obeying it very well. Like, but let me try another one, see if I can get an emoji. What butterfly is on a buck? Wait, come on, emoji. All right, we still didn't get an emoji this time. Let me, for example, for butterflies, use butterfly. All right. Okay. Let's try it. Yeah, still couldn't get it. So this interesting thing is that sometimes it can be really hard to get it. Let's just try something. So write, every answer should be a haiku and have emojis. All right. So I'm being really, really clear here, and I got rid of all the other stuff. So here we go. We got a haiku back, right? And we got our butterfly emoji. So it's really, really interesting to try prompt engineering, because you'll see that some things will be completely ineffective and not change the results at all. And then other times things will have a big effect. So you can play around with it here. Eventually you're going to want to run an evaluation across many Q&A pairs to see how a prompt change would change something, especially if it's a significant change. And I'll talk about that in our evaluation session. But you can get a feel for the kind of changes you might see by overriding the prompt template and trying it out with some sample questions. All right. And then the final way that you can try iterating on prompts is actually using the Prompty VS Code extension. So here you can see this little P with the eyes is the Prompty extension. And I can just press the play button next to any GitHub model. And so this is also a fun way to see like how different models would do on a particular prompt, right? So I could try GPT-4o. We actually use GPT-3.5 Turbo by default in the repo, but lots of people do change it to using GPT-4o. So that's definitely a good model to try. So I just press play here, and then the Prompty extension is going to send the sample data here. So this is my sample question, and it's going to render this prompt and send it off to GPT-4o. And then we got, I don't know. I'm trying to remember, why does it happen when we get, I don't know. Let me see. Okay, so we asked, what does a product manager do? What did I get? I don't know. I got this yesterday and I forgot how I debugged it. It's getting in that. Oh, wait, I remember how to debug. Go to the verbose output. Okay, and there we can see exactly what got sent to the LM. So we can see that, oh yeah, you're an assistant answering questions about, so probably didn't like the fact that you're supposed to be doing answering questions from employees. Okay, so let's make the sample data match this question, the sample query here. And let me try running it again to see if I can get a better response. Okay, there we go. So now we got a response here, right? So that would be another way that you could play around with prompts, is using that Prompty extension and just, making a change. Maybe you change the few shots too, you change the sample data, you can change all of that and then send it off to the model and see the responses. So that's also one of the motivations behind behind Prompty, is trying to give people, a single file that, a prompt engineer can work on, make changes, and see the results. Okay, and I see some questions. All right, so let's see. Ahmed asked, is there a way to hide the developer settings using environment variables? That's a great question. There is not an environment variable for that right now. I think that would probably be a good environment variable, but we'd also want to keep in mind the fact that even if we hid the developer settings, you can still send in these parameters via API, right now. So I think you'd actually maybe want an environment variable that would both hide the settings and also disable the customization of these parameters via the API, right? So it depends what, like, I think people have different use cases when they hide the settings. Um, and that's something we need to explore how to make easier. But keep that in mind, is that even if you visually hide the developer settings, these are getting sent over API requests. So ultimately you have to prevent it on the API side as well, if you do not want users to be able to do this stuff. Like, I think the most popular one to remove would probably be the prompt override, right? But you may want to prevent users from doing any of these things. So yeah, I think that's a great discussion we should have about what people want. So that would be a good issue or discussion thread to start. And then Paulo asks, what's my opinion of separating the AI solution design from the app front back, like with prompt flow, and just calling the prompt flow endpoint from the app? Yeah, it's a good question. I think we all like dream of having a front end that's separate from a back end and having this nice, clean like separation. Practically, what I found is, there's, I guess, so many features that have kind of front end implications and back end implications that the front end does need to know a fair bit about the back end, right? Like they have to agree on the citations and the how they're going to send back supporting content and the thought process and all of that stuff. So I really haven't successfully completely like managed to keep front ends and back ends separate, and it's been easiest for us to develop all of it inside a single repo where the front end is able to fully support everything that the back end can do, and vice versa. So if you're able to achieve that, great. I've personally actually found it a bit hard. Cool. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, so that was modifying the prompt, and we talked about Prompty. You can learn more about Prompty from prompty.ai, and do try it out and give them feedback. It's very new, and they're rapidly iterating on it. As you see, we can change the code and restart the server to change the prompt. We can change it in developer settings, and we can change it and try out the Prompty extension. We also have the chat tab, and that's what most people, spend their time using. And that one has the multi-turn RAG flow that has the query rewriting step. So that actually involves 2 calls to the LLM. The first one to rewrite the query into a better query, and the second one to actually answer the question. So when you are modifying those prompts, you're going to want to modify both the query writing prompt. Maybe this one actually isn't very domain specific, so you could also just leave it alone. And it also has function calling, so you can modify that if you want, but you could also just leave it alone. And then you're definitely gonna want to modify the question answering prompt, because that one does say that it's about healthcare plan questions and employee handbook, and you'll be your domain is a different domain, right? So I would just go in and find the prompt and say like, okay, with with plant questions, right? Whatever I need for my domain. Okay, so that was about prompts. Now let's talk about customizing the UI. This is the front-end code layout that I showed before. So this is what we're going to be modifying in order to change the UI. The first thing that we can customize is the strings. Now, this chat application is actually localized into a bunch of languages thanks to our amazing contributors. So when you are changing the strings, you're going to want to change them in multiple languages, or just disable support for the languages that you don't want to translate for. Just depends on your who do you expect to use your app and what languages they might use. But I'll start off just in the English locale. So what you can see is that all of our strings are in these JSON files where the string has a key, and that's what the React components reference when they pull it out. And then the value, which is the actual string, right? So if I was going to go into, let's open up Spanish too, so we can see that, side by side. I know we have some folks from Peru and Mexico here, right? So let's say I can go ahead and change it. And do I still have my, okay, great. So I still have this open. All right. So I can go in here and be like, okay, it's going to be, native plants rag. All right. So here I'm changing the page title and the main header. And then, remember, if I've got my, if I'm, got my reloading open like this, it should just reload and then I can go back and I can see it already says native plants rag. I don't even have to reload the page, right? So we can go through here and be like, okay, so basically just search for the string you want to change and be like, okay, let's see, ask questions about plants, do a cute little sunflower here. Okay, that looks good. We want to change these examples, so we can look for examples here. All right, so we can be like, okay, what plants go in full sun? What butterfly likes buckwheat? And any native tree ideas. Okay, so now I've got new examples. So now we've changed that. And yeah, and so as you can see, like I've changed all the domain specific strings to now be specific to plants. Oh, there's one more. It's this one. Does buckwheat like sun? Okay, there's this little placeholder. Okay, so now it's looking very planty. Okay, good. So that would update the English, and then if you wanted to update for other languages, you would change these translation JSON files here in order to customize it for each of the languages. All right. So the next step is that we want to customize the colors to make it match our usual domain colors, right? And so here, when I want to change colors, let me show you what I usually do. I right click on something and I inspect. So this opens up our, browser toolbar, and then I look at the class name. So you see this class name is header container. And it also has a bunch of gobbledygook. So ignore the gobbledygook. Just look for the thing that, looks like a variable name or a class name. So I find this header container. And then I just go to my, go to the code base and I search for header container. And what I see is a CSS file, right? And then around here, I can see, oh, there's a background color, right? So then that's how I find it. So generally when I'm, modifying a front end, I do a little inspect element in my browser to figure out like what is the actual, class name that I want to modify. And then boom, right? And then we can see, oh, like that one needs updating too. Okay, so I go here and, I search for this and look around here for, for a background. Maybe it's the one up a level, right? You can kind of look here and you can inspect and see like, oh, okay, like this is the one that has the background header nav list, right? So this is just the general approach to customizing a front end. Okay, that wasn't exactly the same, but we should find what was the color we used here. All right, inspect, find that color, and oh, there we go. Okay, all right. Boop. There we go. That looks good now. Okay. And there we go. So now we've customized some of the colors, and that's the general approach I take to customizing any of the colors is, inspect element and look at the class name, find the class name and modify it. For the screenshot here, you can see all the files I had to change in order to change all of the colors in this page. And yeah, and so that'll get you more customized for your look and feel. Now, if you do change colors, I want to make sure that your colors are still accessible. So I'm encouraging you to run an accessibility check on your new colors because it's really easy to accidentally create a color combination that has low contrast and is really hard for people to see, right? So what you can do is install the Accessibility Insights extension from Microsoft, and it uses Axe Core, which is this amazing library that you can use across Python and JavaScript and stuff. So you can also do this programmatically. But the easiest way is get this extension, run the fast pass, and then here, see, I did a good job. Great. If I had messed up, like I actually messed up when I was doing it earlier today, I didn't have it accessible enough. So let me try it Let me try failing. I want it to fail. All right, here we go. Let's see if that'll fail. Looks bad. There we go. So this fails, and it'll say like, okay, these don't have enough high enough contrast ratio. Instead, you should use this and this. So it's really cool. It tells you what fails, and it suggests what color ratio would actually work, and it gives you the exact hexadecimal. So it's super, super useful. So that's just a plug for making sure you have accessible colors if you do change the colors. All right. And finally, the default settings. So talking about developer settings again, we have these default settings. So, we use like a 0.3 temperature when we're answering the question. We usually retrieve 3 search results. We don't usually suggest follow-up questions, but these are all things that you could change if you wanted to. Like if you decide like, no, for our use case, it's actually better to always, retrieve 5, and we want a little more creativity. We're going to go, 0.4. Right. And when you change it just here, then it'll just, it'll only apply to, this tab, this session here. If you wanted to change for everyone, you actually need to go into the front end code and change it here. So let's see, like temperature, right? So this is actually where the default is. So it'll sets the default here, and then it sends it to the back end. In the future, I want to change it to the defaults are in the back end because I don't like that we have to change the front end to change this. But for now, you have to go in here, and then we could, and then it, that'll affect it going forward so that everyone who uses the front end, it'll send these to the back end. Okay. So there we go. So now you've done some customizations. And so that's the basic customizations, right? But maybe you want to go farther, right? Like, and that's the advantage of having a fully open source repo is that people can take it wherever they want, right? Like we try to add lots of features to the repo that keep coming up that everybody wants to know how to do. But also like, this is RAG. Everyone's got their own domain, their own kind of documents. Like there's so many places you can take it, right? So if you're thinking about adding new features, my one warning is do not reinvent the wheel, right? I mean, you can if you want, like it's fun. Coding is fun, right? But lots of people have probably worked on the feature you're interested in. So you can often find features that you might want by checking the repo's pull requests and issues, right? So if you look at the pull requests, well, a bunch of it is dependabot, but you see like this person. So this is one of our great contributors, bnoter. So this PR adds LangFuse integration. So if you're interested in LangFuse, you could go ahead and take this branch and move and bring it into your code, and boom, now you've got LangFuse, right? There's another one like shuffling examples. That was another one from the same contributor actually. Like I didn't merge this into the main one yet because it's unclear if everybody wants it, but it's there. Or creating a button to stop streaming of responses, right? So sometimes it takes time for us to bring these features into the main repo because we have to keep in mind like how it's going to affect everybody using the repo. But if you know that you want that feature, you can find the PR and you can bring it in. The other thing you can do is you can look at similar RAG repos, right? So for example, sample, this one is also a RAG repo, and we have fairly similar features, but they do have like a thumbs up, thumbs down, right? So if we were looking to see how they did thumbs up, thumbs down, you could totally look at this repo to get an idea for how they did it, right? So I encourage you to check out PRs and other repos. Also check out issues. You can see we have 536 issues. That's not because it's a really buggy repo. It's because people use it in so many different ways. And I like to keep the issues open so that people can like find other people with the same questions, the same ideas. You can kind of share code, share approaches. And so that's why there are so many issues, is because of all the ways people are using it. So definitely check the issues, file new issue or file new discussion. I just enabled discussions. So lots of places that you can look for inspiration if you're thinking of some feature. Somebody else may have thought of it as well. All right, so here's our customization checklist. So you definitely want to modify the data to meet your data. You'll want to modify the prompts to be specific for your domain. You'll probably want to modify the front end headings and titles, basic streams, the example questions. That's like your bare minimum of what you should modify. But you may want to modify look and feel. You may want to modify the default developer settings, and you may want to add new features, right? The world's your oyster. So we are now in the final 1 minute of our session today. And these are your next steps, right? Please do join the upcoming streams. I love getting to have all of you in the chat and getting your great questions. So you can see we've got a lot of streams still coming up. If you haven't yet, you can deploy the RAGChat from the repo. And if you have any questions, you can post in the issue tracker or discussions. Or I've got my office hours tomorrow in Discord at 12:30 Pacific Standard Time. So you can come there with questions as well. And hopefully we can get everybody deployed with a RAG solution that works for you. If you are generally interested in RAG, we've put together a bunch of RAG resources. So you can sign up for it here. You have to enter your email address. I think you also get signed up for our newsletter that sends you Microsoft developer resources. So check that out as well for just general RAG resources. All right. Okay, so there we go. For the office hours, there's a question about the office hours. So office hours, you come to Discord, we'll be in the Discord stage, which means I'll have audio and you all can have audio. You can also screen share. So if you're having a bug, you can actually share your screen. That's why we're doing it in Discord, because you can't share your screen on YouTube. I can, but you can't, right? So so that's a sort of format that we can do in office hours, is to answer questions, but also we can even do screen share if it comes to that. So do come to that. Yeah, and the PowerPoint slides are available. I have uploaded them to my personal drive so that everyone can grab them. I think we shared at the very beginning. There we go. So there is the slide URL. So please go ahead and use the slides. Feel free to re-deliver the slides if you have some use case for that. It'd be great. I'll always share all the slides and everything I can. Awesome. All right. Covers it. So once again, thank you everyone for coming, and hope to see you at our next session on January 21st. Bye, everyone.